Ladies and gentlemen, it's really nice for me to have this possibility to present once more the outcome of survey works and also have some insight into analysis works which are going now as a presentation. Okay. Presentation our thoughts about the site in the upcoming publication. Okay, so first of all, an introduction to the topographical context of the site, which was already discussed and presented. But I'd like to have a more detailed insight to the vicinity of the site. So we must have in mind that, as was already mentioned, that this area was quite densely inhabited at the time of existing our settlement, which I will refer also to as Philoxenite. And we have map of the sites where already the late Roman inhabitants is proved by archaeological evidence. But of course, it is incomplete as we don't have any complete survey which covers the whole area. There was, of course, the known survey of Lucy Blue and Emad Khalil. And now there is a quite huge survey of the French mission from Central d'Alexandrine, and but more or less they are moving in the triangle of three relatively big towns, or maybe I will keep it as towns. So Philoxenite, Abomina, and Taposiris Magna. But we need to have also in mind that there is another very interesting site not far away from our Philoxenite, which is surely an older settlement and was also inhabited in the late Roman period and had quite extensive baths as well. It has never been properly published, or I would say it was never published at all. And it also is an interesting context for our site from a different point of view. How, in fact, our knowledge is poor about the region. Let us see those mapping of in this pinkish color all the combs which were drawn during surveys of 1914 and 1940, and the majority of them were not identified or researched by archaeologists, and unfortunately many of them disappeared or were covered with the modern buildings. So probably it is not possible to recover its history and meaning. And of course, the web of the ways would be even much denser, as we see here. Those are the roads from the survey 1914 and partly 1940, where the number of people who inhabited this area was much more lower than in the late Roman period. And we need to also hesitate if there was only one road from Philoxenite to Abomina, or even several ones. So now we leave this wider topographical context of the settlement, and I would like also to say a few words on the history of mapping of the site. So the site, I will refer as the whole peninsula because it gives, I think, the better perspective of our site and its complexity. And it is also good to know that, in fact, those ruins were already noticed by the French come visiting, say, Egypt with Napoleon, and they made some impressions of the first cartographer and topographer of a modern period. And they were not only noticed on the map, and this detailing of the survey is quite astonishing when we take under consideration that it's a map in scale 1 to 400,000. And also they were described in memoirs of one of the topographer from that time. I think most comprehensive mapping of that site, also including or attempting to identify some functional elements of the town, is also, it should be ascribed to Mieczysław Rodziewicz, already mentioned here. So we have this this eastern part of the peninsula, but we should not forget about the western part, which was included to the mentioned survey of Lucy Blue and Ahmad Khalil. And unfortunately, the very western part of the peninsula was never subjected to any survey. And I think it's also another part, another job that should be done. And when it comes to my survey as a part of the project under conduct of Professor Derda, with humble beginnings in 2018, in 2020, which I must admit was the most fruitful season, it was possible to render not only the building remains, but also to identify irrigational web of the surrounding area. And the last season was mainly focused to complete some already so regions which were not enough surveyed or were excavated during last season, and also to investigate more deeper the irrigational system, which I will describe later. So we gained a map in scale 1 to 500 or even 1 to 200. Of course, it must be admitted that the region of Basilica, for example, and the western part, so the north part in the eastern east from the Basilica apsis, there are plants incorporated from older surveys, as this indicated by the arrow by the survey of Professor Kościuk, who also commenced here as a first researcher at the study of the modular webs of the site, and the plan of the Basilica, as well the plans of the so-called Krakow baths or the eastern baths are here thanks to Daria Tarara, who worked with the Krakow Archaeological Mission. But as an effect, we have a plan which covers majority of those of this peninsula. So I think we now can have a good material to discuss a quite huge fragment of an ancient landscape. And during last season, it was also possible not without problems and surprises, but to gain an image from a drone of our site, which is not only the photography, but the topography. And I get those plans already yesterday. So the work is really going on, and every day brings something new. So now just a glimpse of analysis. Of course, the analysis can go, it can goes to different directions. So building materials and bonds, urban composition, function, and chronology. When it comes to building materials, of course, I will stay at the urban level of the study, of the research. But even at that level, different building materials on the different building methods allow to identify some chronology of the site as a whole. So we have the dominant ashlar here, in fact, with untypical use of bricks. And the second type, rubble work, but not just a plain rubble work, but quite, it was, when it comes to the method of building, just well kept and reinforced with ashlars in specific distance. So it is also, it is surely a cheaper way of erecting walls, but it was quite a good work of a mason. And also we have the brick work, but it must be stated that those constructions in Philoxenita were restricted to the very specific functional areas. And if we found a brick construction, it is almost always connected to water and heat and heating. So parts of the warm parts of baths were erected with bricks. So when we have this overview of the building materials, here only ashlar versus rubble, we see the rubble work is in orange. We see that the spatial difference is obvious, that we have certain parts of the settlements which were almost exclusively erected using rubble work, especially this southern part. And when we look closer, we have also this interesting situation where the building of a church or chapel was erected with ashlar blocks and then surrounded with rubble work. And it's not only a change in technique itself, but also the direction of walls changes. So of course, it should be compared with archaeological evidence, but it suggested at least some break in the building phase. So it's not one phase. However, even for the rubble work constructions, very fine paving was used. It should be also seen in the context of urban composition, which I have already once presented in the late 2020, as far as I remember. It's, I think, already almost widely known that we have here a really subtle urban composition, considering not only the planners of this town were not only aware of the geometric composition, but also the functional aspects of the settlement. It's not also a very rigid grid, but it was subtly composed and suited with the topography of the peninsula, which is also for a such settlement not an easy one. And we, of course, could discuss all the axes, especially the axis of the main wide avenue, which was connecting the Great Basilica in the north part of the peninsula with also quite vast baths in the southern part. We don't have time to discuss all these details, but I would like to show that how the different methods of planning. So in this northern part, we have quite good visible big blocks of buildings of different function. Sometimes those directions are surprisingly consequent, especially in this green direction, as it was continued even far from the main urban tissue. And in the southern part, we have also quite consequent urban grid, but as I already told, it was also erected in a different building method. So we have not only different planning, but also different technology of building. So it also so the next step would be the probable different chronology of that parts of the philoxenite. And those differences are visible even on the ground, so that the relics of the rubble work buildings are quite different, even for those who are not accustomed to this site. We have also such places like this indicated with arrow, where both techniques mingle together and a rigid plan can be extracted, at least at this point of survey. But also it should be stated that we cope here with the most hilly part of our site with complicated topography. The further aspect would be function. Of course, there are a lot of functions to be discussed. I would like to focus on only several, just few of them. So facilities at the lakeshore. The lakeshore, what is quite obvious, played an important role for this place. But we should also have in mind that not whole lakeshore was dedicated as a place for ships and boarding. And this here indicated in blue surely was, so the piers, but the story is much more complicated, as this long causeway, as the French mission excavated, so researched the structure in the early 2000s. They found out that it was probably founded, established in the Roman period and probably refurnished in a late Roman period. And it also can be, it is probably the same with those, at least this big pier in the northern part of the settlement. Those small two piers are really one of the most curious structures of the site, but I will refer to them later on in context of the agricultural part of the peninsula. And we have another interesting structure, so-called triangle harbor, which is situated in the very important. So we have this triangle, partly overgrown now, but is situated in the very important part of the settlement. So if we, as visitors, used this small bay, we would be on the best possible access to visit the atrium, to go to the atrium of Basilica and then to the Basilica itself. So when we've heard about the Patriarch visiting this site, I think it would be the best place for such important person to land and go to Philoxenita and now further to Abomina. We have also a lot of sacral areas and buildings. And here in this geomorphic contour, there is a region of necropolis with different kind of burials and construction erected in rubble work with a chapel or a church, which exact identification as Xenodochion, this I would leave to the archaeologists. And going further on, we have this structure excavated during last season. If it was one complex as wide as the bigger rectangle, of course, it is just a hypothesis, but it could be also that big. And there is another candidate for at least partly sacral area, also in the northern part of this southern suburb of this town. What's also is quite interesting that we have this probably later addition to the settlement with a lot of sacral context, and of course the great basilica, which was already widely discussed and functions in literature, and baths and latrines, which take a big part of the city, or rather town, I would say. So we have this southeastern baths excavated by the Krakow team, the western baths excavated already in the late 70s and early 80s by the Egyptian team under supervision of Fahrani, but also some American archaeologists working and documenting it. All those baths were supervised with water and had its own water wheels, sakias, and water reservoirs. And vast buildings of latrines, which were situated on the lake shore very cleverly, so not a huge extensive sewage system was needed for them. The relics are partly under the water, so it's really sometimes difficult to document them. And the last season was good as for the supplementary work, as the table of water has fallen. So we have really extensive system of latrines and baths, somehow oversized for this size, for this settlement, as a further point that it was constructed and designed for people passing this place by after a journey. And of course, the remaining urban tissue, which needs further investigation. It is not preserved well, but still covering a lot of archaeological evidence. So there is a place for probably lodgings, marketplace, and so on and so on. Streets and ways of this place also indicate the north-south direction, and this bounding with the lake as the main input of travelers. So we have those big piers and a very interesting one of the most representative or monumental place of Philoxenite, a kind of a corniche at the lake shore, but we need to open our imagination. On the right side, we had baths with arcades and really well paved wide street, which on the one side had the lake. And of course, there was, at least to the base of the peninsula, there was only one main road leading to the mainland. And the very interesting rural areas, as the majority of the peninsula was covered with the rural areas, so it's everything south from the green line. It's nowadays it looks like that, especially after heavy rains, which sometimes happens in November or even October, but it's rarer. And this area is really full of subtle but still visible relics of irrigation system, with very well built stone channels, small channels, and probably within this area a huge construction, a huge complex should be discussed. We sometimes refer it as a villa rustica, but it was really a villa. It's difficult to say at that point of research at that stage. I could discuss it further, but just to show, to depict the newest foundings, the system of irrigation, the whole area was really extensive and well planned, well founded, and also we have similarities in the vicinity of the site as this from so-called academia, which was also started by the French mission. And during last season, we decided to investigate the central part, almost the central part of the this urban area, with very important, I think, crucial element of the whole system, as the magnetic survey conducted by Tomasz Herbig revealed not only a huge water wheel, at least 14 to 16 meters in diameter, but also a huge water canal, which allowed also to reconsider the structures visible on the magnetic survey already from the year 2018. So we have here a really huge construction. So it's along at almost more than 300 meters long. It is wide from 5 to 8 meters. And it was connected with a branch with this huge water wheel. How long it was, we cannot say, but it could extend to the south of the peninsula or to the east. If it was connected on the another side with the lake, it's an open question still. And having the possibility to have borings last season, we made one in the canal, so the water occurred, And now we know that even in the depth of 440, there is, so the canal was surely as deep as 420 or 430, because on that level we had also pottery, and pottery not from the time of the existing of the peak of the development of philoxenite. And when we see it also with the context of the harbor structures, we need to reconsider its function. So if it was connected with water wheel, then it was surely used as a source for water for the irrigation. If that is true, as it seems, then we can say that the water of the lake was really suitable for the crops. And if the canal was so wide and so deep, so maybe it was also possible to navigate there with a small boat. But all that is a hypothesis now, and this is the mouth of the canal with small piers which extend more than 10 meters into the lake. And of course, the questions considering the chronology, which are already tangled, can be discussed even further, but it would prolong, I think, my presentation too much. So at this point, I will thank you for your attention and give my voice to Professor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I think that a good counterpart for this presentation will be the next one by Marius